Catus, Maximus here. Figured I'd finish out my update on basic socketry drive tools with half-inch drive T-handles. 6 years ago I did a video and I had hardly any of these tools. Really you only need one, maybe two, short and a long handle. And now I've collected enough. I started off redoing the video of L-wrenches. Then I did half-inch drive breaker bars, because I hinge head, because I had so many of them, and realized in my old video 5 or 6 years ago I only had 2 T-handles. Now I have 9, so I'm quite proud of myself. I hope you're proud of me too. So, sliding T-handles are the very next higher grade of tool over just a straight square drive L-wrench. The dynamic that they offer is the fact that the handle can slide. So you can take a fastener, break it, slide it to the center, and now it offers both a two-handled balanced operation, so you can actually spin fasteners out pretty quickly, as well as not having the handle have to swing around and, in many situations making you have to remove the socket and put it back on, because you can just go round and round. And that's the deal with these. They are indeed breaker bars, because you just have a thick piece of steel through a closed loop machined head. These are very tough. Two things happens with these. Either the bar bends or the anvil shears. Usually it's not, I've seen a couple in bins where this upper head part is cracked, but mainly when people have been hammering, and on cheaper versions, we can see on this Craftsman, it's taken a bit of hammering, but it's still held up. Good old Craftsman USA. This one being advertised as a 9-inch. Now, hand tool manufacturers, both old and new, are notorious for this. Like this Craftsman being rated at a 9-inch. Well, if we kind of take it literally here, sure, the handle's 9-inch. But everything beyond the center line of the anvil is not usable. So if we actually take it from the center line of the anvil, we can see it's actually a little bit shorter than 8.5 inches. Half an inch off of 9 inches is still a few percentage points, but that's something you get used to. The other thing that happens with these is some manufacturers do include a recess for at the center. Some don't. I have this VBW here, which is actually reasonably well-respected German brand here. I don't know if this had like a friction ball in it that is worn out, or if this one just never had it. But I was kind of surprised. Chrome vanadium German wrench. And there were a couple things about this one. One, the stops are really far in. Usually, like on so many of these, the stops are pretty close to the end of the handle, so that you get maximum use. Having the stops be really far in, I mean, this thing is ridiculous. Those stops are, well, in inches, we're talking like 3/8 of an inch from the handle, which really doesn't make any sense, because all this material on both sides is just extra weight. It's just pointless, basically. The other thing I wasn't so a big fan of is the bearings were pretty small, and I think it is this side here. Had to look at this bearing here. You can see is not even really pressed in all the way. I had actually put it in a press and jammed it down a little bit further. And if they're not properly pressed in, then those bearings are actually notorious for falling out. And I've seen a fair number of these heads without their bars just because of that. So the VBW, kind of like its round head, but it just seems like a puzzling unit. Because it just didn't seem to really the steel may be good quality, but once again, the small retention balls, them being far in, and the fact that there is, not even a spring friction, just didn't make a lot of sense. So that's what the most basic version of a T-handle. And of course, the big problem with not having any kind of resistance is obviously you can't put the socket. You got to use a separate hand to hold the socket sideways. The big advantage to T-handles, and maybe we'll look at this old SK here. I'm not exactly sure what era this is from, but this is a nice example of a better one where we have undercuts for the ball, so that you can get it to hold sideways when you attempt to apply it to a fastener. Really deep undercut on this SK, and I've seen these SKs and they do bend right there. But as we can see, larger retention balls closer to the end of the shank. Now the big deal about these things, we'll even switch to another one here, is the fact that you don't, this one has like a snap-on level ball detent in there. This thing is stout, but it's also my only no-name one. The idea of these is the fact that you don't have that hinge handle like traditional breaker bars, so that it can't flex up or down. So it's a more solid connection, and there isn't really much. I mean, you can push sideways on it, but the force is being more efficiently transferred into torque because you don't have to waste energy trying to prevent a hinge handle from maybe flexing one direction or the other. And you seem to get a bit of feedback when you're also tightening fasteners. This one's also unique, and I kind of like what they've done here is that they, instead of using the whole put a retention ball in it, is they just did a double pinch on each end of the bar, which I actually think is a much better way of doing it. It has not only is this ball detent real strong, just the friction ball in this, even though it does not have a center undercut. Ones that don't have that, it's not quite as easy to get them exactly centered, but I can see where it's, close enough is just fine when you're using it as a T-handle, and so I can see why some manufacturers forego it. So even though this one does not have like the little notch that the SK, it still will hold this deep well. What is this anyway? That is it's a 1-inch drive socket, so it's not a lightweight 1/2-inch drive socket, but still there's enough friction to keep it held horizontally. So even though this is, actually I thought I saw some text there, but I didn't. So even though this is a complete no-name, it actually is built pretty well. I mean, the way they pinch the seal, that will never, ever, ever fail. No worries about it ever falling out. Since they are considered just totally rudimentary, I've been able to actually run into a couple snap-ons just because people, say, oh, it's a T-handle and we don't care. And so I actually have run into what I consider an intermediate length. Whatever this one is, that would be I guess that would be a 12-incher and a 15-incher. And indeed, they have simple part numbers, like this is the S12, and this one is an S15. This is a really old one because it has like the bubble print snap-on, where this one, this is probably a 1950s and 60s. This one's probably 1970s or 80s. It has the slightly more modern underline or snap-on logo. Anyway, not a lot to say about these snap-ons, although interestingly enough, on the 12-inch, there isn't any recesses. I mean, it works okay. I mean, it's fine. It's a snap-on. But you'd think it would have a recess and would be similar to the older one. This older one really had some careful attention paid to it because you can see the handle sucks in almost flush to the head. And that means that it can swing around in a very tight space. I mean, with this 1-inch socket here, and the infamous snap-on Super Duty ball detents, you can see that the edge of the handle there will actually fit within the diameter of the 1-inch socket, and it has a little notch for the balls. And both, actually this one is an S12L, where this is just an S15, but if they're both quote-unquote S-series T-handles, it doesn't make sense that the one that appears to be older, well, maybe it does make sense that even with snap-on, the older tools are a little bit better. And upon actually looking at this, if I look at this one here, I do not believe that this has any, not all snap-on tools. Snap-on is really known for major tools having date stamps, special symbols stamped on them. But not always, and it's surprising that this one does not have that, because on this one, if we look, we have, oh, I just saw it. Ah, there we go. Come on, camera. You can do it. Whatever that is, it's kind of like a 6, but with made out of like a little bits of straight lines and like a that's what it looks like. It looks like a 6 that's been scratched in with the scribe, and it was just a bunch of straight lines. So oddly enough, the older one does have a date code. Wow, actually I didn't quite realize that. So I looked up this shape, that little angled 6 there, and apparently this is a 1946 snap-on, making this a 78-year-old snap-on T-handle made the year after World War II ended. So it's actually kind of historic being made a year after World War II ended. And you can see this one, I only paid $5 for it. That was a great deal for a truly classic snap-on. I do have my big boy. This is my Mac V18T. And so this does have an undercut, although I'll give Mac credit, it is a very shallow one, so it will resist bending when you have a long boy 18-inch T-handle. It is a Mac, it is proper, it does have a recess, so it will hold the retention ball. The handle sticks out just a little bit more than the, I've already mentioned, this old Snap-on has the most flush-fitting one out of all of these. But nonetheless, this Mac I've actually used quite a bit just because it is a nice 18-inch long T-handle breaker bar. This one's really great for the lug nuts because you have plenty of length. Break the nut, then put it in the middle, and just the amount of mass that it has, once you just give it one flick with your wrist, it has enough momentum to carry the lug nut all the way off of the stud. So this is one of my favorites right here, this Mac. And I probably should mention this, as even though this diameter is really compact on an L wrench, when you actually look at the height, and this is an old Proto, or excuse me, an old Plum, and we can see that it's a little bit higher than, or a little bit taller than a T-handle. So T-handles are truly pretty low profile. Maybe not quite as short as some half-inch drive ratchets, but they do offer a lot of strength. Actually, I grabbed a gear wrench 90 tooth here, and we can see that, well, let me get a more even, probably about there. There is still quite a bit of difference. This is probably 25-30% lower profile, but of course the diameter is huge. Anyway, once again, this big old Mac is my favorite one, I think. But I do have two Protos. This one here, oddly enough, does not have any branding on it. That is a Proto part number, USA. And then one of my rare Caterpillar branded T-handles. And also, the only one that I have that's in a carbon finish. What they did to do the undercut is they actually have this turned down area, which results in there being an undercut for the ball bearing. I don't know if that really affects the strength of it. Probably does a little bit here. But as far as how I knew that this chrome version, besides it looking real similar to this Cat one, is when I put both of these together, and I thought this was kind of amusing. Both of these have the same part number, 589566. Yeah, one's chrome, and the Cat version is carbon finish. Certainly wish I could get more hand tools that had the word Cat on them, given the name of my channel, but one is better than none. Just like cats. Anyway, there's a comparison of 9, actually halfway decent T-handle, sliding T-handle breaker bars in 1/2 inch. See you next time.